for keeping yourself and your surroundings cleaner in today's world. For Lagosians in a growing megacity, this need has never been greater. A functional waste management system for a rapidly growing population. Welcome to the Lagos state you dreamed of. For so long now, the idea of a cleaner and safer environment for Lagosians has seemed like a flickering light. With more people inhabiting the state, more waste is being generated, and we need an effective structure to curb it. There is insufficient infrastructure to support water distribution networks, as well as a gap in the involvement of the private sector to invest in its betterment. And what do we resort to in a bid to curb waste? Open burning needles to increase the risk of lung diseases, substandard water treatment solutions directly linked to cholera, malaria, and other similar ailments, or living to build the Lagos that we want, the one that we desire. This is the end. Did you know that 80% of Lagos State lies on the coastal plain, making it prone to regular floods and displacing its citizens at will? On the journey to 2052, the LSDP initiative will call a clear path to economic development at 10 times its current state. For a thriving economy in a human-centric city, where effective governance is the order and infrastructure is modern, Lagos State will emerge from poor living conditions. You will relax and breathe in a cleaner air full of promises. You will embrace life and potential once again in an environment that is designed to suit everyone of your need.
Thank you very much. Before we go on, the QR code for the questions will come on the screen now. So for guests in the room, please take a picture of that and send in your questions through that portal. Thank you. Are we ready? Lovely questions, easy questions, things you already know. Mr. Aduban, I'm not putting you on the spot, but I'm starting with you again. Lagos is that mega city, right? Lagos is a huge city and people are coming in daily. Please speak into your mics when you're responding. People are coming in daily to Lagos. Yesterday, I had 80 people per day. I'm like, I don't think that can. I think that's small. That's a very conservative number. Per minute. Per minute. That sounds more like it. And with more people comes more waste. We just spoke about that. It's a continuous cycle. What are some of the factors driving the poor waste management and culture in Lagos?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for that question. In response to that, waste management as a whole, in Lagos, like you said, we estimate that we have well over 1,000 people that come into the city on a daily basis. And for what does that mean? Each and every one of us on the average generates a minimum of 0.65 kg of waste daily. So in a city where you have over 20 million, you can be conservative enough to say we have 13,000 metric ton of waste that comes out every day. As long as we continue to exist and we continue to wake up and go to bed every day, that 13,000 minimum will come. So the aim for us is to find a better way where we can continue to put them as a resource rather seeing them as a waste. So there's a lot of change in the way we are putting waste management in Lagos over the last, since the start of this activity of urbanization, a lot of things have changed because we come to terms with it that waste will not finish, it will not end, it is continuous. So what value can we derive from it? How can we make sure that it helps with the creation of more positive economic impact in the state? How many jobs can we create out of it? And I'm glad to say over the last 3 years, from recycling alone, we created over 12,500 jobs. And we continue to see many recycling companies spring up. But all in all, that 13,000 plus metric ton, we have a minimum of 13,000 residents of Lagos that deals with that every day. Every day is a continuous process with a lot of resources, a lot of advocacy done day in, day out. So for me, being here today for me is a positive thing because it creates a lot of awareness as well for people to know exactly what's out there. And like you said, waste management has different streams. From the point of generation to the point of treatment or waste to wealth that we call it now, there are various stages that people can plug into. And one of the biggest challenges we have is attitudinal change. In as much as those of us that work in that sector understands that we have to find sustainable way to ensure that this creates economic value and is sustainable for the city as a whole. The people that we're serving as well need to change the attitude. How we dispose our waste, indiscriminate dumping of waste has impact on health, water, and various other things that we do. And also accepting waste as a major need for everyone. Like most people, if you do a survey and say your DSTV versus your waste bill, DSTV first or Netflix bill first. Or you can do without those things if there's no light. But you cannot do without waste. Even if you isolate yourself in a room for one day, I challenge you not to come in contact with law by any day. Because if you wake up and you drive, you see our sweeper, you see our trucks, even within your room, you still generate waste at that point in time. Even if you are fasting, you're still going to drink water, and the bottom there will come to Loma. So it's something that we all have to change our ways, think about environment, the generation unborn, and I'm glad that we're looking at up to 2052. Because you start now, you don't just see a plane flying in one day. A lot of people talk about different things that waste can bring. I know that this administration will bring waste to energy to Lagos, and a lot has been achieved by the some of our administration. But we all need to support in doing the right thing the first time, but also need to get to where we need to be as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Otobari. What I take from there is that waste is a resource and it's free. So what can we do with it? And how can we plug into making Lagos that mega city we all want to live in, especially for our children and grandchildren? Thank you so much once again. So similar to there's waste management and there's access to clean water. What, if any, is the connection? Is one hindering the other? Is there a connection? Mr. Bango, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, there's a connection between waste and water, and that's why we talk about wash, water, sanitation, and hygiene, which we talked about attitudinal change, and that's where hygiene comes in. Because you can have all the water facilities, you can have all the sanitation facilities. If people's attitude do not make use of them, then they don't get benefit. They still get sick from drinking water that is untreated and things like that. So there's a need. You need water to dispose waste. Okay, when you talk about wastewater, for instance, you can talk about septic, you can talk about that when it goes into sewage. It's some aspect of water because you need water to flush the toilet, for instance. You need water to wash your hands. So there's a link between waste and water. And water can be contaminated by waste. So that's the duality. You can get water properly to ensure that you dispose waste properly, to treat waste properly. You can end up having waste, if not properly managed, contaminating water and making people sick. So that's the link. So as we talk about access to safe water and clean water, you must always think about, in fact, we always say now that when you're talking about water, you consider water also in the light of what you need to treat proper waste, so that you ensure that people eventually get all the benefits of proper waste management and proper water supply. Otherwise, they keep fighting one another and people become the victims.
Thank you. You know, listening to that, I kept listening, hearing Fela's stuff. What did he say? He said, water. You can't fight with water. So let's just remember that. Going on to Mr. Debi. So there's inefficient waste management and water sanitation practices in Lagos today. What solutions do you think can solve? So I mean, I know it's a big one, but these steps, what steps can we make?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I think some of it has already been spoken about. You know, attitude change is one of the key things that we see. At Recyclers, we try to engage people really around changing their behavior or their relationship with waste. Because what we try to do is help people capture value from waste. Everybody, as at the beginning mentioned, people generate waste on a daily basis. The challenge we are facing is that people don't know what to do with that waste. And obviously, we have a huge deficit in terms of infrastructure. We all know this in terms of our society that we are facing today, but we're trying to close that gap. But in order for us to really get ahead of that, people have to be more effective on how they manage their waste. And all these things that we are disposing of, we're throwing in gutters, we're throwing outside our streets, or burning them, they actually have value. And the business that we actually run takes some of these materials, adds value to them, and sells them for a profit. And we see that as an opportunity to solve the problem in the short term as we close this gap that we have in infrastructure. Because we can't just invest away at all the solutions today. We have to try to find other ways to get ahead of the problem. And coming into points where we engage people, let them understand the value of the waste, let them see that this is something that can actually bring benefit to their families. And then you actually create almost an army of people that are solving the problem, as opposed to trying to solve it individually or saying one people can solve it, has to be a government solution, has to be a private solution. It can be an everybody solution. So I think that's really what we try to push home to individuals is how do you see an opportunity with the amount of waste you're generating? How do you maximize the resource that you have with you currently? And how can you actually take something back from it? Some of the examples of things that we see, at least from our own business that we do, we engage a lot of people that don't have jobs, don't have education, and are able to actually create a livelihood from it. So you have people that maybe they might be widowed and they don't have a woman to take care of 4 or 5 children, but when they start collecting this waste and bringing it to us, and they actually are able to take care of their family. And so imagine if we can replicate that across the large population that we have in Lagos today. There's so many people that don't have resources or don't have means to income. So we are actually solving 2 problems. We are solving that waste issue we are discussing, but we're also solving the key issue of poverty, because that's something that we're always struggling with. So I think really engaging people and letting them know the opportunity they have in this waste and really working towards ensuring that we maximize the output that everybody can provide.
Thank you. And let me add to that by saying that what I heard you say is there's exposure, your level of exposure and education, and then there's value creation. So value creation is where you make money from waste. And then the exposure is because of poverty levels and all of that, we treat waste differently. So once we address those 2 key issues, yeah? Good. Thank you so much. So I move on to the next question. Mr. Clemogoji, this is for you. There's a need for investments and incentives to promote availability and access to clean water in Lagos. What incentives and what investments can be provided to promote water sanitation and recycling culture in Lagos?
Thank you very much. It's a 2-part question, and I'd like to focus first on the issue of sanitation and recycling. I think the first thing that we need to recognize is the fact that we are dealing with solid waste essentially. Okay, and this solid waste is not going to evaporate. Okay, these are materials that they are concrete realities. The second thing is that we can't landfill waste. We can't continue landfilling. It's not sustainable. It's not even advisable. Okay, and the third thing is that unfortunately we can't continue to export our waste. Okay, for the simple reason again that it is not sustainable and it's also not wise, because we are exporting value, we are exporting jobs, we are exporting so much economic opportunities. So the question then is, what are we going to do with waste? And it's interesting to hear, recyclers and of course, Mr. Otomboni talk earlier around creating value from waste. Incidentally, Lagos is a huge city in terms of the amount of waste that is generated on a daily basis, in terms of the population that we have in the city, and also in terms of the economic opportunities and industrialization. And I think that is where we have this huge lost opportunity. Now, we talk about what incentives and what investments, can be done. But I think the most important question, fundamental, that we need to address is how do we create a market for waste? Because we have to create a market so that people are requesting for these items and people can transform these items to become materials for industrial and commercial production. And I give you some examples. Already we know that you can make, if I take plastics, for example, which is one of the most problematic waste materials in the waste stream, you can make roads from plastics, okay? You can tar roads from plastics. You can build houses from plastics in terms of making bricks, okay, and making roofing sheets and a whole lot of other things. And I think that there is a huge opportunity. I'm just coming from the built environment session. And we talk about, the amount of construction that is going on in Lagos on a daily basis. And I think there's an opportunity for us to link this sector, okay, and so many other sectors to say, how can we use the waste that we don't know what to do with them to address the needs of sectors like that? For instance, if the government can sit down with the Real Estate Association of Nigeria or whichever authorities, are responsible in those sectors to say, how can we repurpose waste to become a useful material for the building industry? For instance, today there are technologies that can, you can make roofing sheets from plastics. You can make, bricks from plastics. You can make paving stones from plastics. And these are things that we continue to spend so much money importing into the country. Now, if we're able to create a need for this, then of course the demand for this waste material will be huge. And the investors who see the market opportunity will bring in the money to make this work. So the importance of creating market is that you don't go chasing investments. Once there is a market and investors can see that there is a market opportunity here, there is a demand, there is opportunity to supply, and there is money to be made. Money will naturally flow into that sector. So I think it's important for us to address that issue. The second example is the food and beverage industry, for instance. It's only in this country, among very big countries across the world, where recycled bottles are not being used into production. And that's a huge opportunity. Okay? There's so much plastics in beverages that we have in this country. Yet every time we're using virgin to make new plastics. But we have an approval in the country, what we call the food grade recycling standards, which was approved 3 years ago. Until today, we still don't have companies who are making beverages from recycled bottles. That's a huge opportunity that we have lost. And I think this is where policy needs to come in. So how can we use policy to drive demand for this? For instance, creating a mandatory requirement for a certain percentage of recycled content in bottles that will go into beverage making. We can also sit down with the Real Estate Association to say, how can we create an incentive? For instance, some kind of certification program or a tax rebate program to say, if you use X amount of recycled materials or from waste to build houses, you get X kind of benefit. And I think the government can sit down there. So I'm not going to waste so much time, but I think the most important thing is that let's focus on creating the market, using policy to drive demand for these waste materials, and then of course that will open up the avenue for investment and other incentives to come. I hope I have opportunity to elaborate on this later. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sure you can speak with him after this session, but I don't know about you, but what I hear is ching, I hear money. I hear money being made. Yeah, and of course there's a part the government has to play by giving the right policies to let this happen for everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Okoji. Going on to the next question, Mr. Kwale Funshosa. Based on your understanding of LSDP, how can required infrastructure needed for effective water sanitation be secured in Lagos?
Thank you very much. Securing investments, it's about securing the supply of water. But we have to distinguish between water resource management and water delivery service. They're two different things. We have a shortage of water, clean water supply. Some calculations say we have 40%, some say 50% of the population is served. Whatever it is, there's a big mismatch between production and service. Some numbers. Let's say today we produce something like 40 million gallons per day. The demand today is it's something in the neighborhood of 300, 400 million gallons per day. That's just make very clear to us what the demand gap is. But that's production. What about distribution? Because that's what gets the water to the people. There's a big mismatch between the pipe network assets that we have in Lagos today. So, but there's a third problem, losses. Of the little that we produce, published figures tell us that we're losing 60% of the water we produce today disappears into the network. Let me make it worse. The installed capacity for water production in Lagos today, it's about 220 million gallons per day. We're producing far less. But imagine if all those plants are in production, we will have 800 million liters of water moving in our network every day. But we don't know where the water is. We don't know where the water goes. We cannot do, people have no service, they are not happy, and we have no revenue from the water. So where does the water go? So how do we secure supply? Yes, we have to build more waterworks. Yes, we have to densify the pipe network. It's a huge problem. If you have a spend of 100 and you spend 30 on a water treatment plant, you need to spend 70 on the distribution. So just imagine if you want to lay new pipes on Victoria Island today, the amount of disruption you are going to cause to traffic, to people's houses, but it has to be done. There is no option. So going forward, the immediate attention has to be paid to, in fact, we have to pause the building of new waterworks, because we build the waterworks, we can't deliver the water. The water is trapped, what is pumped out is wasted, people are not satisfied, they have no service. So we should pause the production of the building of new assets. Let's densify distribution network and get service and metering and get service to the people and get revenue. That is from the water delivery service. It's a policy issue, it has to be. There's no time to wait for. Now let's talk about the risks. What are the risks to investment in Lagos? We all know that bankers are the most nervous people in the world. You want to create a project which you say is bankable. They're going to start asking you some questions. Okay, you want a concession of 20 years. All right, are you sure of the water supply for 20 years? Now let's talk geography a little bit. Lagos, we are at the lowest point in the country. We have two water regimes that bring water to us. I'm talking rivers now. Ogun River to the west, Osun River to the east at Ekpe. Ladies and gentlemen, we can build new waterworks. They've been designed, but there is nobody today who can tell us what is the safe yield that we can extract from Ogun River. Nobody can tell us. We have ideas of what it is. The Federal Ministry of Water Resources and the Ogun-Osun River Basin have the constitutional role to monitor water use on these river basins. But nothing happens. So a major policy decision has to be made in Lagos. Water delivery service is Lagos Water Corporation. Water resource management has to be Ministry of Environment. There has to be a study. It's science and engineering and technology. There has to be active study. We cannot leave it to federal government. We cannot, because everything we're talking about development in Lagos, 25 million people. If there's no water, we're going to be in serious trouble. Nothing will go on, nothing will happen. And water is such a valuable resource. So in the east, Osun River brings only very little through Odumola. But we've gone on this river by boat from Ekpe to a place called Odumola to see. But there are cycles of from meteorological data, there are cycles of drought on that river regime. That to even build a sizable waterworks at Ekpe to now feed the Lekki corridor would require a mixture, a blending of lagoon water with the river water in order to have a substantial volume. So this study is critical. But what are our other sources of water? The lagoon, the sea, and groundwater that we all take every day. Ladies and gentlemen, groundwater is poisoned. You had the Commissioner for Health a few weeks ago saying the groundwater is dangerous. Why? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, only in parts of Lekki and Victoria Island would you find saline intrusion in groundwater. I can tell you today, in some parts of Lekki, you drill to 200 meters, at 150 meters, you would meet salt water. Where did it come from? It came from the ocean. Because as we extract, water comes in from the ocean. What comes is salt water. So it pollutes our groundwater. What we all rely on, a lot of houses rely on today, will disappear. The water security is critical, very critical. It's an emergency, actually. Today, I can tell you categorically that as far as Onikon and Osborne, you find salt water in boreholes today. It wasn't so 10 years ago, and it's progressing. So we have to manage that risk. It's a big risk. Lagos can fund it from ecological funds. They can extract money from the federal government. The final one, a quick one, critical as well, is an emergency. It's human resource. Human resource. We cannot leave it to the Lagos Water Corporation. I once visited Government Technical College at Agidingbi. They have a mechatronics laboratory. We have no training institute. A new waterworks is being built right now in Lagos. 70 million gallons per day. It's going to be completed next year. Who is going to man this waterworks? Who's going to run it? The existing plants are on demand. So, training. LASSO is there. It can be institutional. They can institutionalize vocational training. Those technical, there's so much. There's technology around available for network management, the IT, but people have to be trained and trained and trained. Thank you.
So we need training. We need to look within the state to build the infrastructure ourselves. Thanks so much, Mr. Kwale Funsho. Mr. Debi, I'm back to you. You know, when we look at other countries, we wonder why things are working better. And we're like, okay, they have applied the necessary policies and implemented these policies. And we've looked through the LSDP. What policy reforms available do you think can promote waste management in Lagos? Like I said, the easy ones, let's start.
Yes. Yeah, I think, you know, from us, as a private sector player, which, you know, we have a social slant, but we're private sector, we always try to focus on solving our problems through that private sector route. But we fully understand that policy is going to support whatever we're doing. And the more policy is helpful for business, the more successful business will be. And as Mr. Clem mentioned, that some of the key policy changes that need to happen is really essential to help build that market. And we have seen a difference, you know, about 3 years ago, as you mentioned, you know, the Standards Organization of Nigeria, you know, finally, you know, implemented the standards for food grade recycling, so you can actually add, you know, recycled plastic into new bottles. And I think that was an indication that, you know, the market was going to improve. And we actually started to see some indications of that, because now investors are seeing that as a means to actually put resource, which is these recyclables, into new products. That essentially now raises the price of the product. So I think, as I mentioned, a key one, not to steal his idea, but a very important policy change will be to mandate a certain level of recycled material that's going into new beverage packaging. I think that, at the minimum, will create a higher demand for the plastics that we collect on a daily basis, and will ensure that we can pay people more for it, but also get more for it and make the business more successful. I think so. That's one key policy change. I think Lagos State has already shown some indication of going in that direction with regards to policy. So waste management policy was initiated last year, and it's currently in place. So I think putting those policies in place are very important, both at the state and at the federal level, because it gives guidance to businesses and it creates an environment where businesses can really understand how to engage. I think from a private sector player, when we look at beverage companies that produces plastics, and we don't want to call them the bad guys, but to some degree, we want to try to partner with them to solve this problem. So making it very, very necessary for these companies that really add to the challenge we're facing to be part of the solution. And one way for doing that is to ensure that there is a policy or a mandate in place where there is a requirement for them to help collect that recycling back, but also to ensure that it stays inside the packaging. So I think there are some things that we can copy from some other countries that already have this in place. The extended producer responsibility is something that is happening all over the world with regards to being able to ensure that producers have a strong play or a strong participation in solving the problem of this plastic waste.
Thank you, Mr. Adebayo. So the producers should look at their footprint and see how they can, and then of course the government policies as well, to see how we can tidy it up as they go along. We're not asking them not to make money, but please help the environment as you're going along. Thank you so much, Mr. Adebayo. Mr. Adobani, the next question is for you. We know that the sustainable goals, we know what they are, most of us, and it's to solve risk and improve environmental, solve the risk of rising environmental challenges. So, Mr. Adobani, what metrics can you say Lagos is looking at in providing clean and safe water alongside efficient waste management systems?
All right, thank you. Before I answer the question, I want to make some additional comments to what the two last speakers have spoken about. So when it comes to waste management, from experience and the knowledge that I have in that, some of the models that were tried to emulate the Singapores of this world, the Netherlands of this world, what they do in other big countries like Malaysia and co. We all need to remember that Nigeria is a federal system of government. So Lagos is not a country on its own. So some of these actions that we are taking, like economic action, we are doing here today, waste management action, it's not being done in some other parts. So if the government makes a decision, a producer like Coca-Cola that is in Nigeria, is only in Nigeria, is only there in Lagos because of proximity. So when you are making a law for them, there's what you call local laws, government, federal laws, and things like that. So in terms of policy, over-policing can have economic adverse effects. But at the same time, good policy is something that we can to localize. And I'm quite confident that Lagos State is doing what we need to do in order to make it a very good, viable business environment for businesses to strive. And that's why people continue to come here. But to buttress some of the points made, COP26 Agreement for Climate Change is saying that all producers worldwide should be aiming for 25% of their bottles to be from recyclables from January 2025. Are we on track in Lagos? Yes. How? I know what you don't know. For example, recyclables, when you gather them before, you have to send all of them to Europe or China, and then this plastic will travel to Europe and China and then come back as a pellet. But now, we have the first bottle-to-bottle company start in Nigeria last month, and they will be taking about 1.5 million bottles away from Lagos system on a daily basis. Over the next 3 years, they will take 6 million bottles a day when the second plant is done. But before now, any plastic we gather, we bail, you send abroad. But now, you bail, you sell within here. So a lot of things have changed. I can imagine someone who became the governor and then started recycling in 5th of September 2019. The number of recyclers we have in Lagos were only 3. And recycler was one of them.
A kg of plastic then was 15 naira. Now a kg runs into 170 naira because that value chain is being created for waste management and water. I will say this: as humans, we need them to survive. Over reliance on government will not solve the problem. Enabling environment is what government should create. As individual, we should find opportunity to grow from there. I tell people, waste and water in this Lagos and Nigeria is a canvas. You can draw your own history on it and become the next Dangote of this world if you get it right. The blame culture, nothing is going to change. Everybody is facing the same problem. It's the same water I'm drinking that the governor is drinking. So why can't I just evolve and find a way around it? So there's a lot to do about that. Also with EPR, we need various NGOs, various expertise. If, for example, in the Netherlands, it took them 15 years to do EPR for the special people that to be on the table. It took 15 years. But in Nigeria, we want it in 6 months. It's not going to work. It's not going to work at all. There's a national plastic policy. Can it be domiciled? Can it be localized? Absolutely not yet. So what should we look at? How do we have things that you make a law there, then you come to Lagos, it's easily implementable, Abi? Because they make a law in Lagos House of Assembly and it's implementable in local governments and co. Yes, that's how it should be. So we should all focus on things that we can control, circle of influence. What can we control? What can we not control? And then find a better way to do things. I also want to agree that there will be a point if this administration can put fiber in most of the houses in Lagos, they can do water. There's a will from this government and there's a will from business sector to come and do it. So somebody came to do fiber, Abi. Somebody will come and do water. Don't worry, that time will come. And that's why I know, and I said earlier in my opening remarks, that I'm very confident that Lagos is doing a lot in terms of the metrics to provide the right information we need to attract investors to come into this state and do waste to energy. Energy is one of the biggest problems that we have. Even if you have pipes laid and there's no electricity to pump it, it's still the same shigbai, no water. But we need to find a way to connect things. So for us, what waste can provide is limitless. But we need to make sure that it's an enabling environment for anyone that wants to come and say, I want to generate energy, I want to do this, I want to do that. It's canvas. And that's why in Loma we've evolved. We moved away from collect and dump. We moved to a lot of research. We have our own Loma Academy, the only one in the whole of Sub-Saharan Africa that talks about waste management, where practical knowledge, finance, everybody meets. Because mythically, people will come and say, I want to do, I want to do. What do you want to do? It's at that Loma Academy that one 18-year-old kid asked me 2.5 years ago and said, sir, when you take this plastic, where does it go? Europe. If it doesn't come back in time, what happens? And that drops the question of, so there's nobody that's even making bottle in Nigeria. I didn't realize that. All the bottles we're drinking were coming from somewhere in Europe or Asia. And then an investor came and said they want to do waste management. I said, don't do that. That's not what we need. Don't need problem in that one. Go to making bottles. And it's a local company, privately owned. 17 billion they sank into it, and they have never regretted since then. But how many of those do we need? We need about 4 or 5 of them. And that's what we need to continue to encourage. So if you see plastic in your drain now, wait for the next few years, you will not see it again, because now it's a resource. So I'll put it back to cans. You never see cans in drain. Why? They are used for aluminum frames. Some of these tripods that you see, they are made from those cans. So if you go to anywhere, before you close your eyes in the party, before they even say light off, cans are gone. The same thing will happen to plastic. It's not government policy that drove that. It's just the economic value that drove that. So we need to continue to find economic value, and government will create an enabling environment. In terms of matrices and things that we need to look for into the future, we are working with various ministries, market and planning, all of our sister agencies in the Ministry of Environment as well, to understand things that investors might have issues with and take them away. That's what we're doing in Loma now. We need to remove
all those things that can detract investors. And then you can come in and bring waste to energy to us because you know our resource is unlimited. The value we get from it is unlimited. But I'll tell you, government is doing a lot. The government cannot do it all. How many of us here know that normal does 500 bags of fertilizers per day? How many? You produce fertilizer because all the waste at mine 12, you cannot afford to be dumping them at mine 12. Number one, they stink. There are loads of organic waste. Number two, they can be turned to something to plant crops for you. So when those trucks come from the north and they bring all those fruits, when they are going back, they don't go back empty. They load themselves with those fertilizers that we have made at Ikurudu, not far from there, and go back. But we can do more of that. Private companies can do more. A lot of things can happen. We want investors that can come in, can do composting, can do biogas, they can do tire to diesel. There's a lot of things that can be done. So the whole point of sessions and things like this is we want investors to come and take the resources that we have. At the moment, it might look like nothing to someone, but then it's looking at value. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Otubode. From this, I'll go to Mr. Ugoji, and that's the last question. And Mr. Otubode just said again and again, I've heard it, a blank canvas, resources, opportunities. That's what I keep hearing. And yes, there's partnership. There's always room for partnership because with the partnership, you can grow faster. So Mr. Ugoji, we look towards the future, and this partnership has proven as an effective tool lever towards achieving most of our goals. Can you mention 8 strategic partners to consider in promoting clean cities and ensuring access to clean and safe water? That's 1. 2, how do we engage negotiations?
Okay, thank you very much. And it's very interesting to hear Mr. Odumboni talk around the plans that the state has. So I'm just saying this to preface my response to your question. But I think there are 2 things that we need to appreciate. The first thing is that Lagos is growing at a geometric rate, okay? And there needs to be a sense of urgency on how we solve these twin problems of water and sanitation, okay? When I looked through the Lagos State Development Plan 2052, there are 2 scenarios. The first scenario is business as usual, okay, which is if we continue to just take our time and things will sort themselves out as we go, this is what is going to happen. And it's not a very interesting scenario. Okay, what it means is that we are kind of like walking ourselves into a crisis. And the second scenario is, if we did what needs to be done with a sense of urgency that we need to do, then we'll begin to see traction and get to the destination where we want to get to by 2052. Why am I saying this? It's because there is a reason why we have government and there is a reason why we have policies, to be able to fast-track things so that we do not allow things to take a natural course. And that is where we think that, government needs to be a lot more forthcoming in terms of, setting the pace and the speed at which we want to see this change happen. He talked about the Netherlands spending 15 years to develop their EPR. That is very true. But the truth is that in Nigeria, the EPR policy or guideline was developed by NESRA since 2014. That's about, 8 years ago. So we're almost getting to where the Netherlands was. But the truth is that because we have the advantage of coming behind, people have already sorted these things out. So we don't need to spend so much time to get to where they are. I think we need to, because the framework is the same globally, we just need to make the necessary tweaks to conform to the realities of our own local environment. And so we can do it a lot faster than that. The second thing is, the truth is, if you do not, move the hands of the private sector, there will be this laissez-faire attitude because everyone wants to operate at the point of convenience, okay? And for you to make change happen, you have to make some things a little bit inconvenient for people to do what needs to be done. And that is why, we need to be able to focus on policy as the bedrock of getting things done, and that is very important. And I'm glad, a lot of things are happening there, like the Lagos Circular Exchange and all of the work that is going on to build a circular economy in Lagos. But the truth is that we need to be able to pace faster. And why is that necessary? Because even if you're going to attract partnerships, nobody wants to come and partner with you and tie down their money for 5 years or 10 years before they will begin to see the benefit of what they want to do. So for instance, if you're going to attract someone to invest in water supply, okay, there are certain things that government needs to do and do with a sense of urgency, so that if a partner is coming from anywhere, that partner has a sense of timing. If I'm putting down this my capital, what time will I begin to see a return on my investment? That is very important. So sense of urgency is critical in that area. Even in the area of waste management, okay? So when we talk about what kind of partnerships are we looking at, I think there are first and foremost a couple of things. And currently there's a work that we're involved with, the World Economic Forum, Secularium, my company is a consultant to it, working with a global plastic action partnership. We are creating what is called a National Plastic Action Partnership, working with the Federal Ministry of Environment and of course, LOMA and LASEPA of Lagos State and a couple of other states are also involved together with international development partners. What is this partnership about? It's about bringing everyone to the table, and I'm using plastics as an example of what is possible, okay? First and foremost, policy is one thing, programs are another thing, but the biggest question is how do you fund all of these initiatives and all of these things that we're talking about? We have a 30-year plan to 2052 for Lagos State. Where is the funding going to come in? So for instance, in the area of plastics, what we're doing is bringing everyone to the table, the federal government, the state governments, international development partners, the World Bank, some of these bilateral development organizations like the UK, FCDO, and the government of Canada, together with the value chain players in the plastic sector. We are creating a platform where everybody can come and have a conversation about these things, okay? And it's about stopping the finger pointing and everyone coming to the table to discuss with an open mind. First and foremost, let's even have an understanding of how much plastics do we have in this country. Today, there is no data that is agreed on. Some studies will tell you it's 1.5 million tons of plastic waste. Some will tell you it's 2.5 million tons of plastic waste. Incidentally, I just saw a recent report that put it at 10 million tons. So where is the truth in this? And you can't solve a problem when you don't understand the size of what you're dealing with. So that's a fundamental thing. We will have a conversation and agree, based on data and other empirical evidence, how much plastics are we dealing with. That's number one. Number two is, where are these plastics flowing to? For instance, what is the trajectory? From the time the plastic leaves a consumer, what is the journey of a typical plastic bottle, in the waste stream? So once we're able to establish that, the then question is, okay, how are we able to create and design a collection infrastructure that can ensure that these bottles do not end up in the wrong place? Okay? And then the next critical question is, what kind of infrastructure investment is required to ensure that we can transform these bottles into the kind of materials that we want them to be? And then the critical question, which is number 5, is where is this funding going to come from? And that is where the local banks are part of that, the international banks are part of that. We will sit down and then develop what we call a sustainable financing strategy for the plastic waste value chain in Nigeria. All of this will lead to what we call a national action roadmap. So what is the point of my conversation here? I'm talking about having what we call a multi-stakeholder partnership. If we're talking about plastics, for instance, or solid waste, we have to bring everyone to the table and have a conversation that is very inclusive. Okay, if we're also talking about the water aspect as well, the question is, okay, we're talking about bringing investors to invest in water. I agree, it might be very difficult for you to start running pipes and everything in all of the built-up areas like Victoria Island. But Lagos is a constantly expanding city. Okay, the Lekki to Ekpe corridor is still very well open, and there is opportunity to get it right in that area. So talking about the water works that is being developed, I don't know where it's being developed, but I think there's an opportunity to reinvent how we develop and solve the social problems using the Lekki-Ekpe corridor or the Badagry corridor, which are still coming up, to then say, okay, for private sectors who want to put in their money, you don't need to start destroying things in VI or destroying things in Ikoyi. There are these virgin areas almost where you can then create new pathways for your piping and all whatnot. Do we have that, platform where people can come and have a conversation around it? The private sector will tell you what they need, the financing sector will tell you what they need, and everyone who is going to be relevant to that conversation will tell you what is required to make that happen. We need that kind of platform, a platform that is multi-stakeholder, that is a round table where the government is not talking to people, but people are having a conversation around how to solve that problem. That is the kind of nature of partnership that we require to make these things work.
Thank you. So it's a partnership of the state government, development agencies, and private individuals or investors looking at the best way to engage each other. It's all about inclusion here, and then we get it right from there. Thank you so much to our speakers. We have a few questions coming in. So the first question is, what's the plan for commercialization of water production and distribution? Mr. Fisher, do you want to answer that in like 2 minutes, please?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of conversation going on, but the commercialization process is slow and is very evolving. I did mention earlier that for a project to be bankable, the bankers are going to ask you, what's your security of the investment in terms of the raw water supply? How is your market? Part of the weaknesses in the system that must be, and I'm sure are being addressed now, is lack of data. We do not have a comprehensive map, for instance, that shows the entire pipe network. I once spoke with the company laying fiber optics. They're in a constant battle with Water Corporation because they complain our pipes are being ripped up in the process. So when we're laying new pipes, there's new technology to have composite pipes that will make room in advance for wastewater, drinking water, and other services like the fiber. And there's a whole of the west of Lagos that has no pipeline. The Lekki corridor has not a single meter of pipeline, as it is. And it's the fastest growing corridor. So there is opportunity. But part of the what will make it very attractive is there has to be a possibility of domestication of the factors. Pipes. West of Lagos, the new water works that I mentioned, is going to require something like 25 kilometers of pipes that are about the size of this room. Where do we import that from? How do you, the logistics, the cost, unless there's a domestication of that production here. The tertiary network that will go around, these are the things that will make it attractive for, make it easy for investors.
That's part of the plastics that can come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not plastic.
What would this be?
Well, some of the raw material eventually will come from Dangote, petrochemical. Eventually.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. The second and last question is, can incentives be given to people when they return their waste to the depot? Mr. Otobone and both of you, Mr. Debbie and Mr. Otobone.
Yeah, I think regarding incentive for waste, that's already ongoing. I think if you look at some of the initiatives that we have, for example, we have the Packer map, which is like a IT solution for collection of recyclable waste. So, for example, if you have a kilogram or whatever amount of recyclables in your house, you download your app on your iPhone or your Google Play Store, you request collection. When you put the amounts there, the volume, it will tell you the equivalent amount, and that can be credited to you. So that's an incentive enough, but it boils down to everyone trying to use that. Because people say promote, we've been promoting over 2 years now. A lot of households are using it. We have over 213 estates that are using it in Lagos. And then the Packer map itself was built from Loma, and now it's being used as the main app for collection of recyclables in all of Malaysia, all of Australia, some part of Texas, but even in Lagos, we are still trying with penetration. When it comes to advocacy and telling people what's out there, I think reached a point where people need to actually go for the value. The value is there. A lot of people will say, I know I'm broke, but you have a lot of recyclables in your house. All the cardboard can be sold off, all the ions and things can be sold off, and it's very easy. Mr. Alibi will tell you, simple, easy, they take your waste and off it goes. If you also separate our waste from source, it will take a long time for the truck to even come and collect your waste, but there's nothing to take. Everything will go automatically. If you have a garden, all your food waste can be organic waste, and then and so on and so forth. So please, I think the incentive is already on.
is ongoing, and we're talking to Fibra, all the producers, Coca-Cola and Co, MBL, to add more to the incentive so that it can be more attractive. And I know that they are coming together to build collection centers all across Lagos. There's an agreement between Loma, Lagos State, and them to have about 350 collection centers for recyclables across the state before the end of next year. So just keep an eye out for that, and then you can take your recyclable that in exchange for cash or other incentives. Thank you.
Mr. Debi, in 1 minute, please.
No problem. Yeah, just like you said, I mean, we've been doing it for almost over 10 years, and it has evolved. I think Mr. Yendi mentioned that, you know, the value of plastics. When we first started with recyclers in 2012, we used to do 10 naira per kg to individuals that brought recyclables to us. So people are paying as much as 100 naira per kilogram. And just for an example, people are making a lot of money from this business where they come with recyclables, we pay them. I think the big opportunity we have here is about awareness, because the more people know and have the convenience of bringing recyclables, the more they can get. But there is already a framework in place where companies are already collecting materials and paying for them. So we just want to encourage more. Some of the brand owners can actually support by raising awareness by TV ads and raising the profile of the value of recycling. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our takeaway from today will be, who would like to have it, Mr. Bawo?
Well, it's to say that some of the provisions in the plan are very good, they are futuristic, but it's important, as we have said. First and foremost, we must get the policies right. Policies assure everybody that we're ready to do business. Private sector is ready to put in money. Partners are willing to support technically and with funds if we have that in place. But I think it's important, and I think I should use the opportunity to make it. I think we should look at this plan again. I don't know how far it is contained, but I didn't see much about hygiene. Hygiene is the glue that glues water and sanitation together. All the things about advocacy and behavioral change. If people's behavior do not change, you will have that water, they will break the pipes, and things will go wrong, they will look away. You need to get people's behavior to change, to see that it's in their interest, to mention that sanitation facilities are maintained, waste is properly disposed. I mean, if you want to solve from the source, we need a lot of advocacy for people to know that it is good to separate waste from the source. So I think we should look at that policy and talk about how this plan, how do we get the hygiene component. Hygiene behavior change for people to see a need, and when you talk about engaging citizens, that is the best way to engage them, because that affects them on a daily basis.
Thank you very much. And I think for me listening to them as well, is we're saying that we should have partnerships, we should, you know, be, I mean, it starts from home. And I don't know how else to say it. They say charity begins at home. Cleanliness and hygiene also begins from the house. And if you know that there's value to it as well, not just for yourself, but for your environment and money-wise as well, why not? I mean, that's the way I see it. So thank you once again to all our speakers. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone that came in to listen to us. And this session is officially over. Thank you.